Dr. Kaveth Zon-Ri adjusted his chitinous carapace nervously as he watched the human delegation approach through the reinforced viewing port of Research Station Gamma-7. The Zephyrian professor had spent the better part of 3 cycles preparing for this moment, the first official academic exchange between the Galactic Consortium and the newly contacted human species. "Professor?" His assistant, junior researcher Nix, chittered anxiously from behind him. "Are you certain this is wise? The reports from the border worlds suggest these humans are unpredictable." Kaveth's compound eyes tracked the approaching shuttlecraft. The humans had insisted on minimal security protocols, which had sent ripples of concern throughout the consortium's leadership. Most species required extensive quarantine procedures, threat assessments, and protective barriers when introduced to new environments. The humans had simply requested a place to land and someone to talk to. "Science requires risks, Nix," Kaveth replied, though his mandibles clicked nervously. "Besides, we have taken precautions." Those precautions included Sentry, his prized research specimen, a Terror-Hound from the death world of Mordek Prime. The creature had been a gift from the consortium's military arm, a living weapon that had somehow bonded with the academic during a research expedition gone wrong. Standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, with scales that could deflect plasma rounds and teeth designed to crush starship hull plating, Sentry was both Kaveth's greatest achievement and his most reliable security measure. The Terror-Hound emerged from the shadows of the laboratory, its 6 legs carrying its massive frame with predatory grace. The creature's elongated skull, crowned with bone spikes, turned toward the viewing port as it detected the approaching vessel. A low rumble emanated from deep within its chest. Not quite a growl, but a sound that made every other species in the galaxy instinctively flee. "Easy, old friend," Kaveth murmured, running one of his 6 arms along the creature's armored hide. "They are guests." The shuttle touched down with remarkable precision on the landing pad. Kaveth noted the craft's design: sleek, efficient, but lacking the heavy armor or weapon systems that most species incorporated into their vessels. Either the humans were supremely confident or supremely naive. 3 figures emerged from the craft. They wore simple, form-fitting suits that seemed more focused on comfort than protection. No visible weapons, no energy shields, no protective force fields. Kaveth's scientific curiosity warred with his survival instincts. The lead human was tall, even by their species standards, with graying hair and calm blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Behind him walked 2 younger specimens, one with dark hair and olive skin, the other fair-haired with the kind of easy smile that made Kaveth's prey detection instincts tingle. "Professor Zon-Ri?" The lead human's voice carried through the comm system as they approached the station's entrance. "I'm Dr. James Harrison, Xenobiology Department Head at Terra University. These are my colleagues, Dr. Alex Rivera and Dr. Sam Mitchell. Thank you for hosting this exchange." Kaveth activated the external communicator. "Dr. Harrison, welcome to Research Station Gamma-7. Please proceed to Airlock Beta-3. I should warn you, I have a research specimen with me. Please do not make any sudden movements." There was a pause, and Kaveth could hear what sounded suspiciously like chuckling over the comm. "Understood, Professor. We'll try to behave ourselves." As the humans made their way through the station's corridors, Kaveth found himself pacing nervously. Sentry had taken position near the laboratory's main entrance, the Terror-Hound's battle-scarred hide bristling with anticipation. The creature's 4 eyes, 2 primary optical sensors, and 2 heat-detecting secondary organs tracked movement beyond the sealed doors. "Remarkable," Nix whispered, studying the bio-readings from the approaching humans. "Their stress hormones are barely elevated. Either their species lacks proper fear responses or they're more dangerous than they appear," Kaveth finished. The laboratory doors hissed open, and Dr. Harrison stepped through, followed by his companions. Sentry's response was immediate and terrifying. The Terror-Hound rose to its full height, bone spikes extending, scales shifting to their most intimidating coloration pattern. The sound that emerged from the creature was unlike anything Kaveth had ever heard before. A combination of roar, hiss, and something that seemed to bypass the ears and go straight to the terror centers of the brain. Nix immediately scrambled behind a bank of equipment. Several other research assistants in the laboratory fled entirely. Kaveth himself felt his legs lock in place, overwhelmed by the proximity to his own specimen in full threat display. The humans, however, stopped walking. Dr. Harrison held up one hand to his companions, who immediately halted. His eyes fixed on Sentry with what Kaveth could only describe as appreciation. "Well, hello there," Harrison said softly, his voice carrying an odd warmth. "You're magnificent, aren't you?" Sentry's growl deepened, the sound reverberating through the reinforced walls of the laboratory. Every instinct developed over millions of years of evolution told the Terror-Hound that these soft, slow creatures should be running. Instead, they stood their ground with an incomprehensible calm. "Fascinating," Dr. Rivera murmured, pulling out a small recording device. "Look at those bone density adaptations. Professor Zon-Ri, this specimen appears to be from a high-gravity world with significant predator pressure." "Mordek Prime," Kaveth managed to stammer, still frozen by his own pet's display. "Gravity Index 2.3 Standard, Atmosphere Classification Death World Prime. Sentry here was a pack hunter." Dr. Mitchell stepped slightly forward, and Sentry's attention snapped to him like a targeting laser. The Terror-Hound's secondary heat sensors dilated, reading the human's elevated body temperature and rapid heartbeat. Yet the creature paused. Something was wrong with this prey response. "Easy boy," Mitchell said, using the same tone Kaveth had heard human ship handlers use with their mechanical loading units. "We're not here to hurt anyone." "Boy?" Kaveth's translator struggled with the term. The closest equivalent in Zephyrian was young packmate. But that couldn't be right. Sentry took a step forward, claws clicking against the metal flooring. The Terror-Hound's primary eyes studied Mitchell while the secondary organs tracked Harrison and Rivera. The human should have been overwhelmed by terror, should have triggered the creature's killing instincts. Instead, Mitchell extended one soft, pink hand. "Sam, what are you doing?" Rivera hissed. "Building rapport," Mitchell replied calmly. "Professor, has this creature been isolated from its pack?" "Pack?" Kaveth's mind reeled. Terror-Hounds are solitary predators. The largest groups ever documented numbered 3 individuals, and only during mating season. Harrison moved closer to his colleague, his own posture relaxed but alert. "The bone structure suggests pack coordination. Look at those communication ridges along the skull. They're designed for long-range sonic coordination. This isn't a solitary hunter, Professor. This is a pack coordinator separated from its family." Sentry's growl shifted in pitch, becoming less threatening and more questioning. The creature's head tilted, a gesture that seemed almost curious. One massive paw lifted and settled back down, a behavior Kaveth had never observed before. "You miss them, don't you?" Mitchell said softly, taking another step forward. "Your pack, your family." The Terror-Hound's bone spikes began to retract slightly. Kaveth watched in amazement as his research specimen, the creature that had single-handedly defended him from a Krellian assault squad, seemed to deflate. "Professor," Harrison said without taking his eyes off Sentry, "how did you acquire this specimen?" "Military expedition to Mordek Prime," Kaveth replied, his scientific fascination overriding his fear. "Sentry was found injured, separated from. I was told it was a territorial dispute." "A territorial dispute that left a pack coordinator alone," Rivera said grimly. "Dr. Mitchell, I think you might want to." Her warning came too late. Mitchell had closed the distance to within arm's reach of the Terror-Hound. Sentry's massive head, easily the size of the human's torso, lowered until they were eye to eye. The creature's breathing was audible, each exhalation powerful enough to stir Mitchell's hair. "You've been alone for a long time," Mitchell whispered. "Haven't you, old friend?" Then he did something that made Kaveth question whether humans possessed any survival instincts whatsoever. He reached out and gently touched the Terror-Hound behind one of its bone-crowned auditory organs. Sentry went completely still. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the laboratory was silent except for the hum of equipment and the sound of several species barely breathing. The Terror-Hound's eyes, all four of them, were fixed on Mitchell with an intensity that should have preceded immediate violence. Then Sentry made a sound that Kaveth had never heard before in 3 years of research. The Terror-Hound purred. It was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to emanate from the creature's entire body. The bone spikes retracted completely. The intimidating scale coloration faded to neutral tones. And then, in a movement that defied everything Kaveth knew about Terror-Hound behavior, Sentry leaned into Mitchell's touch. "There we go," Mitchell murmured, his hand moving in slow, careful strokes behind the creature's auditory ridge. "There's a good boy. You just wanted someone to understand, didn't you?" The Terror-Hound's rear section lowered until the creature was lying down, its massive head still level with Mitchell's chest. The purring intensified, and what Kaveth could only describe as a contented expression crossed the predator's features. "Impossible," Nix whispered from behind his equipment bank. "Terror-Hounds don't. They can't." "They can," Harrison said with something approaching wonder in his voice. "They're pack animals, social creatures. Of course they respond to comfort behaviors." He looked at Kaveth with something that might have been pity. "Professor, has anyone ever tried to simply pet this creature?" Kaveth's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Pet? Physical comfort contact," Rivera translated, her recording device working overtime. "Stroking, scratching, gentle touch. It's a bonding behavior among Earth mammals. But Terror-Hounds are apex predators. They're weapons-grade organisms. The military classification clearly states." "The military classification is wrong," Mitchell said firmly, both hands now working behind Sentry's auditory ridges. The Terror-Hound had somehow maneuvered itself into what could only be described as a cuddling position. "This isn't a weapon. This is a highly intelligent, social creature that's been alone for too long." As if to prove his point, Sentry turned its massive head and, with surprising gentleness, nuzzled Mitchell's shoulder. The next few hours challenged everything Kaveth thought he knew about xenobiology, Terror-Hounds, and apparently humans. What had begun as a formal academic exchange had transformed into something unprecedented in Consortium history. A human giving belly rubs to one of the galaxy's most feared predators. "This is remarkable," Dr. Rivera said, her instruments scanning Sentry's neural patterns as the Terror-Hound lay contentedly on its back. "Look at these serotonin levels. They've increased by over 400% since Dr. Mitchell began the contact protocols." Mitchell himself was sitting cross-legged beside the massive creature, one hand rhythmically scratching the surprisingly soft skin beneath Sentry's armored chest plates. The Terror-Hound's rear legs occasionally kicked in what Kaveth was beginning to recognize as pleasure responses. "Contact protocols?" Kaveth asked weakly. His worldview had been fundamentally altered in the span of a few hours. "Standard procedure for pack-bonded species experiencing isolation stress," Dr. Harrison explained, making notes on a tablet while keeping one eye on the interspecies interaction. "We've seen similar responses in Earth canines, cetaceans, even some primate species. Social contact, particularly gentle physical contact, triggers massive neurotransmitter releases." "But Terror-Hounds aren't social," Nix protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "They're classified as..." "Classified by whom?" Rivera interrupted. "Military analysts who encountered them in territorial defense situations?" "Professor Zon-Ri, where exactly on Mordek Prime was Sentry found?" Kaveth accessed his files. "Sector 7G, approximately 200 kilometers from a major population center. The military report indicated they encountered a group of Terror-Hounds defending a..." "Oh, defending what?" Harrison prompted. "A nursery site. The report mentions several juvenile specimens." Kaveth's compound eyes widened as the implications hit him. They weren't being territorial. They were protecting their young. And Sentry here was probably a pack leader or coordinator, responsible for group defense, Mitchell added, scratching behind the creature's auditory ridge. Sentry's purring intensified, and what Kaveth swore looked like a smile crossed the predator's features. When he was captured, he lost his entire social structure. His family. The Terror-Hound seemed to understand the conversation. Its massive head turned toward Kaveth, and for the first time since their initial bonding, the creature's expression seemed almost accusing. I didn't know, Kaveth whispered. The military said you were dangerous, that you needed to be contained for research purposes. Sentry's response was to roll back onto its side and present its back to Mitchell, who obligingly began scratching along the creature's spine. The Terror-Hound's rear leg began kicking again. "He's not angry at you, Professor," Mitchell said gently. "Are you, boy?" You know the professor was trying to help. Sentry's large primary eyes fixed on Kaveth. Then the creature did something extraordinary. It extended one massive paw toward the Zephyrian scientist. "He wants you to join us," Harrison observed with a smile. "Sentry recognizes you as part of his new pack structure." Hesitantly, Kaveth approached. His assistant Nix made worried chittering sounds, but the professor ignored him. With trembling hands, Kaveth touched Sentry's extended paw. The Terror-Hound's purr deepened, and the creature gently, impossibly gently, curled its claws around Kaveth's arm in what could only be described as a hug. "There we go," Mitchell said approvingly. "Pack bonding behavior. Professor, you've been caring for him for 3 years, providing food and shelter. In his social structure, your family." Kaveth found himself stroking Sentry's armored hide, amazed at how the scales seemed to soften under gentle touch. "All this time, I thought I was studying a specimen, but I was adopting an orphan." "Essentially, yes," Rivera confirmed, her scanners showing increasingly positive neural activity from the Terror-Hound. "The question now is what we do with this information. We start by correcting the consortium's classification of Terror-Hounds," Harrison said firmly. "This species isn't a collection of solitary predators. They're highly social, pack-bonded creatures with complex emotional needs. The military won't like that," Nix warned from his safe distance. "Terror-Hounds are currently classified as weapons-grade organisms. If they're reclassified as people," Mitchell finished firmly, "because that's what they are, non-human people with their own culture, social structures, and rights." Sentry's head turned toward Mitchell, and the creature made a series of soft chuffing sounds that somehow conveyed agreement and gratitude. "The bigger question," Harrison continued, "is what happens to Sentry and the other Terror-Hounds currently in Consortium custody." Kaveth's heart sank. There are 17 Terror-Hounds in various research facilities across Consortium space. All of them were captured under similar circumstances. All of them separated from their packs, their families, Rivera said grimly. All of them probably experiencing the same isolation stress that Sentry's been dealing with. As if sensing the turn in conversation, Sentry rose to its full height and moved to stand protectively near Kaveth. The creature's posture wasn't threatening. Instead, it seemed almost supportive, as if offering comfort to its adopted packmate. "There's something else," Mitchell said quietly. "Professor, has Sentry ever shown signs of wanting to return to Mordek Prime?" Kaveth thought about it. "He often stands at the observation windows, looking out at the stars. I always assumed he was hunting instincts, perhaps. But now you're wondering if he was looking for home," Harrison finished. Sentry's confirming rumble answered that question. The next day brought complications that Kaveth hadn't anticipated. Admiral Krextor of the Consortium Military Command stood in his laboratory, all 4 arms crossed in disapproval, while Sentry demonstrated his newfound social skills by attempting to play fetch with Dr. Mitchell using a piece of laboratory equipment. "This is unacceptable," Admiral Krextor declared, his insectoid features rigid with military displeasure. "Terror-Hounds are strategic assets. You cannot simply reclassify them as pets." "They're not pets," Dr. Harrison corrected calmly. "They're people. Sentient beings with their own social structures and rights." Mitchell threw the device again, and Sentry bounded after it with surprising grace for a creature his size. The Terror-Hound's joy was unmistakable as he returned the object to Mitchell. "Tail. When had Kaveth started thinking of it as a tail?" Wagging enthusiastically. "Sentient," Admiral Krextor scoffed. "They're weapons. Biological weapons designed by evolution to kill efficiently." Sentry's head turned at the harsh tone, and the creature's posture shifted subtly. Not threatening, Kaveth noted, but protective. The Terror-Hound moved to place himself between the Admiral and the humans, a clear defensive positioning. "Stand down, Sentry," Kaveth said gently. "The Admiral is pack." The Terror-Hound looked at Kaveth, then at the Admiral, then back at Kaveth with an expression that clearly conveyed doubt about the Admiral's pack status. However, the creature relaxed slightly. "Remarkable," Dr. Rivera murmured, recording everything. "He's responding to both verbal commands and social cues from Professor Zon-Ri. Classic pack hierarchy behavior. What I want to know," Admiral Krextor continued, "is why the humans were able to pacify this creature when our best handlers require shock prods and containment fields. Because you were treating him like a wild animal instead of a traumatized individual," Mitchell replied, his tone carrying a hint of steel. Sentry wasn't aggressive, he was scared and lonely. As if to demonstrate the point, Sentry approached Admiral Krextor with careful, non-threatening movements. The Terror-Hound's massive head lowered in what Kaveth now recognized as a submissive greeting posture. The Admiral stepped backward instinctively. "Keep that thing away from me." Sentry's ears, Kaveth was definitely thinking of them as ears now, drooped slightly. The creature made a soft whining sound that was heartbreaking in its obvious disappointment. "You just hurt his feelings," Mitchell said flatly. "Sentry was trying to include you in the pack structure, and you rejected him." "Terror-Hounds don't have feelings," Admiral Krextor insisted, though his voice was less certain than before. "Then explain this," Dr. Rivera said, showing her scanner readings. "Elevated stress hormones, decreased serotonin levels, and neural patterns consistent with what humans would call emotional distress. Sentry is experiencing what we would classify as sadness." Dr. Harrison stepped forward, his expression serious. "Admiral, we need to discuss the immediate repatriation of all Terror-Hounds currently in Consortium custody. These beings have been separated from their families and social structures. It's causing significant psychological damage." "Absolutely not," Admiral Krextor declared. "These creatures are too valuable as research subjects and too dangerous to release." Sentry's response was immediate and startling. The Terror-Hound stepped fully in front of the humans and Kaveth, his posture protective but not aggressive. Then he began to vocalize. Not the threatening roar from yesterday, but a series of complex tonal patterns that seemed almost like communication, Kaveth breathed. "He's trying to communicate with the Admiral." The sounds were hauntingly beautiful, rising and falling in patterns that seemed to convey complex emotional concepts. Even Admiral Krextor stopped his objections to listen. "He's singing?" Mitchell asked quietly. "Pack coordination vocalizations," Harrison confirmed, his own recording device active. "He's trying to establish social bonds through traditional Terror-Hound communication methods." The song continued for several minutes, Sentry's massive form somehow conveying both strength and gentleness. When he finished, the Terror-Hound looked expectantly at Admiral Krextor, clearly hoping for a response. The Admiral stood silent for a long moment. Then, grudgingly, he said, "That was unexpected." Sentry's tail wagged hopefully. "The problem," Admiral Krextor continued, "is that we have reports of Terror-Hound packs being increasingly aggressive in sectors near Mordek Prime. If we release our research subjects, we risk strengthening potentially hostile forces." "Hostile?" Dr. Harrison's eyebrows rose. "Admiral, have you considered that they might be searching for their missing family members?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Kaveth accessed his data files. Admiral cross-referenced the locations of increased Terror-Hound activity with the capture sites of our current research subjects. After a moment, Admiral Krextor's expression shifted. They're the same locations. They're not being aggressive," Mitchell said firmly. "They're looking for their families, for creatures like Sentry who were taken from them." Sentry seemed to understand the conversation. The Terror-Hound moved to Admiral Krextor and, very gently, placed his massive paw on the Admiral's lower arm. The creature's eyes, all four of them, fixed on the military leader with an expression of unmistakable pleading. "He's asking you to help him go home," Kaveth whispered. "To help all of them go home." Admiral Krextor looked down at the paw on his arm, then up at Sentry's hopeful expression. For a moment, the hardened military leader's facade cracked. "This is unprecedented," he admitted. "So is first contact with humanity," Dr. Harrison pointed out. "Sometimes unprecedented situations require unprecedented solutions." 6 weeks later, Kaveth stood on the observation deck of the CNV Reconciliation, watching as the jungled surface of Mordek Prime grew larger in the viewport. Beside him, Sentry pressed against the transparent aluminum, his entire body vibrating with excitement. "Easy boy," Dr. Mitchell said softly, scratching behind the Terror-Hound's auditory ridges. "Almost there." The past month and a half had been a whirlwind of bureaucratic battles, scientific revelations, and public opinion shifts. The humans had been instrumental in pushing through the reclassification protocols, while Kaveth had worked tirelessly to document the psychological and social needs of Terror-Hounds. The breakthrough had come when they'd established communication protocols between Sentry and the other Terror-Hounds in Consortium custody. The reunion videos, 17 creatures singing in harmonic coordination across vast distances, had gone viral across the galactic networks. Public opinion had shifted dramatically once civilians saw Terror-Hounds as separated families rather than weapons. "Approaching the drop zone," announced Captain Torres, the human pilot who had volunteered for this unprecedented mission. Sensor readings show multiple Terror-Hound packs in the area. They're singing. Through the ship's audio systems, they could hear it, complex, beautiful harmonies rising from the jungle below. Sentry's response was immediate and overwhelming. The Terror-Hound threw back his head and added his voice to the chorus, the song of a pack coordinator calling to his family. The response from below was explosive. The jungle itself seemed to erupt in answering calls. "They recognize him," Dr. Rivera said, tears in her eyes as she monitored the communications. "They know he's coming home." The landing was carefully coordinated. The Reconciliation touched down in a clearing approximately 1 kilometer from the closest pack's known territory. Sentry was pacing now, his excitement barely containable. "Remember," Dr. Harrison said to the assembled team, "we're not just returning Sentry. We're establishing first contact protocols with a new species. This moment will define human Terror-Hound relations for generations." Admiral Krextor, who had insisted on joining the mission, checked his personal shield generator. "Are we certain this is safe? The pack could see us as threats." "They could," Mitchell agreed, "but they won't. We're returning family to them." The ship's ramp lowered, and Mordek Prime's humid air flowed into the craft. Sentry bounded toward the opening, then stopped and looked back at Kaveth. "Go on," the Zephyrian professor said, though his voice was thick with emotion. "Go find your family." Sentry approached Kaveth and very gently nuzzled the scientist's carapace. Then the Terror-Hound did the same to Mitchell, Harrison, and Rivera. Even Admiral Krextor received a careful, affectionate bump. "Pack," Sentry rumbled, the word clear despite his non-human vocal structure. It was the first word any Terror-Hound had ever spoken in galactic standard. Then he was running, his massive form crashing through the jungle undergrowth toward the sound of his family's calls. The reunion that followed would be studied by xenobiologists for centuries. Sentry burst into a clearing where 12 Terror-Hounds waited, his original pack, minus the members who had died defending the nursery during the original military raid. The creatures swarmed him, all of them singing, touching, confirming that their missing pack coordinator had returned. The emotional intensity was overwhelming even for the observers watching from a safe distance. "Look at that," Dr. Rivera whispered, her instruments recording everything. Perfect pack integration. No aggression, just joy. But the most remarkable moment came when Sentry turned back toward the human team and sang a specific sequence of notes. The pack fell silent, listening. Then, as one, they began moving toward the humans. "Should we run?" Admiral Krextor asked nervously. "No," Mitchell said confidently. "He's introducing us to his family." The pack approached cautiously but without aggression. Sentry moved among them, touching each member, then gesturing toward the humans with gentle vocalizations. One by one, the Terror-Hounds approached the visitors. The largest of the group, clearly the pack's alpha, stopped in front of Dr. Harrison. The creature studied the human for a long moment, then lowered its massive head in what was unmistakably a bow. "Pack," the alpha rumbled in careful galactic standard. Harrison bowed in return. "Pack," he agreed. What followed was the first formal diplomatic contact between humans and Terror-Hounds, a treaty negotiated through song, touch, and the universal language of family bonds. 6 months later, Kaveth published his groundbreaking paper, Terror-Hounds, a reclassification from weapons to people. The consortium formally recognized Terror-Hounds as a sentient species with full rights and protections. Trade agreements followed, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations. The death world of Mordek Prime became a vacation destination, with Terror-Hound packs serving as guides for the incredible biodiversity of their planet. Sentry, now living happily with his reunited pack, had become something of a galactic celebrity. But he still maintained contact with his original research pack, regular transmissions with Kaveth, and visits whenever human ships were in the sector. The humans had done what no other species thought possible. They had looked at the galaxy's most feared predator and seen not a weapon, but a lost soul who just needed someone to scratch behind his ears. In the end, that simple act of compassion had reshaped the political landscape of the galaxy. Terror-Hounds became humanity's staunchest allies, and their home world became a symbol of the power of understanding over fear. And occasionally, when the bureaucratic pressures of galactic politics became too much, Admiral Krextor would quietly visit Mordek Prime, where a certain Terror-Hound pack coordinator would bound up to him, tail wagging, ready for belly rubs and a game of fetch. Because some bonds, once formed, transcend species, politics, and even the vast distances between stars.